The following program is made possible by Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
The June 5th primary is in the books. Was San Mateo County's all-mailed ballot election a success? And what does the voting tell us about what might happen in November?
We crunched the numbers with political analyst Melissa Michelson. The game is politics. The game is on.
I'm Kevin Mullen.
I'm Mark Simon. Welcome to the game.
The June 5th statewide primary election had a lot on its agenda. San Mateo County was one of 5 to make history by conducting an all-mailed ballot election. Did it mean more voter participation? The top 2 primary was supposed to be a sweep for Democrats, but it didn't turn out that way.
We sift through the remains of the day with our own political analyst, Menlo College political science professor Melissa Michelson, co-author of Listen, We Need to Talk, an examination of changing public attitudes toward LGBT rights. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank you.
We got to talk about the all-mail election, and as we sit here, there's still like 70,000 ballots that have not been counted. And if that number is correct and it's added to the total, we'll have a turnout that could be over 35% countywide, which would be way above what everybody else has done. So with that backdrop, was all-mail balloting a success?
It sounds like it was a success, and of course, of the ballots that have been turned in so far, only a very small percentage of them were votes cast at the vote centers. So it seems like people are really comfortable with the vote by mail. They're participating. It's really hard to say though what turnout is, because the numbers at the statewide level and the county level are still both only semi-final. So who knows? Was turnout higher because of the all-mailed ballot? Can't say yet.
Yeah. Do you think it will prove to be? I mean, how did this work? Did it work? I mean, what was the purpose of it? Was essentially to boost turnout? What does your gut tell you?
I don't know if that's the purpose of it, or if the purpose of it is to make voting easier and more cost efficient. Right? Those are the 2 goals of the all-mailed ballot election. I don't know that making voting easier necessarily moves people to the polls. I think there's some people that you can drive to their house with the ballot box and go over it with them, and they still won't vote because they're not interested. And there's some people who will wait in line for 10 hours in the rain to vote because they think it's so important. So I really think voter turnout is more about making people think it's important to vote and making them want to. And making it convenient is great, because I think that's what democracy should be like. It shouldn't be hard to have your voice heard, but I don't know that it's so much about increasing turnout.
So it's still about issues, Kevin, that people I think are important. So it's as much about the campaign as ever, it sounds like.
I think so, and the analysis, it'll be interesting to sort of tease out the role of the all-mail ballot election, having every voter automatically get a ballot, postage paid, and looking at those 5 counties in relation to the other 52, if my math is correct, 53. Well, there's 58 total. So 5.
I didn't know there was going to be math.
53, the other 53 counties. And to see if those 5 counties really have a marked increase. I'm hearing it anecdotally, Sacramento County, which was one of the 5 pilot counties, has an inordinate number of ballots that have yet to be counted, and their numbers are actually skyrocketing in terms of turnout. So it'll be fun to compare those 5 counties against the remaining. But I also think there is a ton of energy in the electorate right now, which will really manifest itself in November.
Yeah.
But June is sort of the pregame show here, if you will, for November. And there is a lot of energy in the body politic, given what's happening on the national level with Trump, and just the number of candidates that have put their name on a ballot in this top 2 primary cycle was pretty dramatic, was it not? Just looking at the number of, in particular, female candidates across the state of California.
Yeah, absolutely. There's enormous energy on the Democratic side in particular, more and more women running, more and more Democratic candidates running. And I think that's evidence of this energy we're seeing, that the Trump legacy, if nothing else, seems to be a reinvigoration of interest in running, especially among women, and in politics.
Well, so we had the all-male election, and the other significant reform that was present in this one was the top 2 primary. And the theory behind that was it would cause people to be more moderate, run more toward the middle because they were speaking to the entire electorate. But what you kept hearing, the word you kept hearing was it was a jungle out there.
Yeah.
So what is your take on how the top 2 unfolded? I know in the 7 congressional races in California, a Democrat made it into the runoff in all 7 of them as of the current tally. Of the 8 statewide offices that are partisan, 5 of them have a Republican in the runoff, which is why we opened the show with the idea that it wasn't really a Democratic sweep in that sense. What is your take on the top 2 primary?
So I don't know that the top 2 primary is working exactly as folks thought it would work, or maybe it is, and this is really what they expected. I also want to correct something I'm seeing repeated over and over again, which is this news that Democrats weren't shut out. They were shut out in the 8th, but that's a very heavily Republican seat. And so the fact is that Republicans do have 1 seat that is so Republican that Democrats were shut out. But in the 7 seats that Democrats have been talking about as areas where they might pick up a seat or areas where they could be competitive, they weren't shut out, despite the fact that in some of them there were 10 Democrats running. And it's because folks saw, oh my gosh, it's a jungle out there. There's so many candidates. What if there's 2 Republicans on the ballot, or 1 Republican and 10 Democrats, and that means that we only get Republicans on the November ballot. We've better do something about that. So the Democratic Party focused on candidates in each of those districts that they wanted to funnel money towards. Some of those candidates who were in the single digits then were telling their supporters, hey, don't vote for me. Let's not ruin this for the party. And so there was a lot of coordination behind the scenes. So maybe, at the surface it looked like a jungle because there's all these Democrats running and it looked like Democrats could be shut out. But behind the scenes, the Democratic Party and those lower tier Democratic candidates were saying, let's not do that. Let's make sure a Democrat makes it onto the November ballot.
Well, why were there so many people running for some of these seats? Was it just a sort of a confluence of all the different issues, national and even local, that were driving people? San Mateo County is the exception. Virtually no one was running against people like Kevin, for which no doubt we're grateful. But you look at some of these races that were expected to be contested, including governor and senator, and the list was absurdly long. Why was that?
I think there was more of an idea in those races that there was a possibility of either making it into November or at least making enough of a name for yourself that you could go on and do something else, right? Because you have to remember that not everyone who runs for office actually is expecting to win. I think many people convince themselves they could win, and their campaign managers tell them, oh yes, there's a chance it could happen.
Which is why you need to spend more money on
better campaign advertisers, yes. But then for some other people, they're running for a different reason. They're running to increase their name recognition because they have a plan for doing something else. They don't actually think they have a shot, but they want to sell books or launch a TV show or run for something else later with that increased name recognition. So that's part of it. But also I think there was just such a possibility. The jungle system, the top 2 vote getter system, really does give people a shot where they might otherwise not have one, right? Eric Swalwell taking the seat over in Alameda County, that never would have happened without the top 2 system. So these things happen, and possible candidates know, like, it could happen. I could actually win.
Well, I don't know why anybody would want to run to end up on a TV show, but with that being said, we're going to take a quick break. We're joined by Melissa Michelson. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more, In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. He's Kevin Mullen, and over here is Menlo College political science professor Melissa Michelson, our political expert. We were talking a little bit about what's driving people to the polls, and we were talking a little bit off the air about there's just an energy. I think that's the term you used, Kevin. Let's talk a little bit about that. What's going on among, as you put it, the body electorate? What's driving them? Because turnout wasn't that great statewide. But there is that sense, not just from voting, that a lot of people are energized. I don't know if there's a better word.
Well, I was just commenting that even in our county, where we didn't have too many contested races, when I have coffee events or you see town halls, people are super energized, mostly about what's happening at the national level, not so much the state level, but people will say to me, well, I'm a routine voter, I vote all the time, but I've never actually come to a coffee, I've never actually attended a town hall. Clearly that there is a Trump effect out there where people are paying attention to the daily news cycle, that rapid news cycle we have, and have been poked into action, and that sees itself in the number of candidates, attendance. I think we'll see it in the voting percentages in June. We are really going to see it in November.
Well, is the campaign all about Trump going forward in November?
Politics are nationalized right now to a degree we haven't seen, I'd say, since the Contract with America Newt Gingrich election of 1994. Really, it is a very national scene, and so, yeah.
But in California, I mean, basically every Democrat's going to be running against Trump, and at some point or another, how much does that even help them? Because it's a blue state. I mean, it's like being like against Trump is kind of like being for oxygen, isn't it?
It's
among some of these voters.
State, and we live in a very blue county, but we're more like polka dot red and blue, I would say. There are there's a significant number of folks in California who support Trump. There's a significant proportion of people who still identify strongly as Republicans, who do want to vote for Republicans for office. And so let's not get too carried away by the bubble we live in here in the Bay Area.
So I was going to say, Melissa, the 7 key seats, I guess, where Hillary performed very well, but they have either Republican incumbent House of Representatives members or are open seats. Those 7 have been targeted by the Democrats. The Trump effect, I'm hearing now that Donald Trump is at like 44% in the CNN tracking poll of his favorability, his approval rating. The Democratic margin in the generic House ballot has been shrinking. 5 months is a very long time in an election year. Can you prognosticate at all? Will Trump still be a driver in Democratic turnout in November? Or is this economy that we have and his sort of tough talk and his rising numbers actually going to have a counter effect of some type in the fall? Because all eyes will be on California in terms of the Democratic takeover of the House potentially.
Right. So there's 2 major factors that are going to affect these congressional races. There's how popular is Trump and how strapped for cash do people feel. So there's, national economic numbers and national unemployment numbers, but what it really comes down to is personally, how much disposable income have I got? How much leeway have I got from paycheck to paycheck? And if people feel like Trump is doing a good job, and if people feel like they're doing okay, they're going to vote Republican. And if people don't like Trump and don't feel like things are going well for them, they're going to vote Democratic. That at the national level for every House seat, those are the strongest predictors. But then it really matters who those candidates are, right? You're going to see a very different race in Darrell Iss's district in the 49th than you're going to see in the 21st district for Valadao. And there it matters. Who are the voters? How much voter turnout work is going on? And what do people think of those candidates?
Well, as Tip O'Neill famously said, all politics is local. Studying some of the analysis of some of the other races, the Senate races around the country, which clearly are not California as we're talking about it, a good number of African American voters were not prompted to vote because somebody supported Trump, because the vote for Trump so disenchanted them that it was just more of the same. So I wonder, is that really the aircraft carrier for Democrats that they'd like it to be? Or is it still about what's going on in people's homes? You know, safety, education, and jobs are almost always the main issues.
There's a difference between what motivates you to vote and what motivates your vote choice. So getting people to the polls, getting people interested in politics, I think Trump has a lot to do with that, and just whether people feel like they are being asked to vote and whether their voice is heard. But the predictors of the vote are then things like the issues, their pocketbook, right? So there's a difference, and to a large extent, what happens in November is more about who decides to vote, and then the vote choices that those communities are going to make.
And your sense of that now is it's just too soon to know for sure what's going to happen?
Yeah. I mean, as Kevin said, 5 months is an eternity in politics, right? We're going to turn the Etch-a-Sketch upside down and shake it, and who knows? Yeah. Based on what happens in June, there's no way to say what happens in November.
I think there's a couple of races we can probably predict how they'll turn out in November. One would be the governor's race, and one would be the U.S. Senate race.
Yeah. Gavin and Kevin's seat.
Well, it's such a slam dunk. It's not even worth mentioning.
Okay, sorry. The governor, the Senate.
Basically, in some of these races where the Democrat has drawn a Republican opponent, especially in the case of the governor's race, somebody who wants to, as close as possible, attach himself to Trump, it's got to be a cakewalk for Gavin Newsom and Dianne Feinstein. No?
I think it's a cakewalk for Dianne Feinstein. I think it's really hard to imagine Kevin De Leon pulling out a win in November. I do think Gavin Newsom's going to have to fight for it, because you have to keep people motivated. If people think it's a cakewalk, just like in November 2016, a lot of folks who were sure that Hillary Clinton was going to win just didn't bother to go wait in line. Mm-hmm. So if it looks like Gavin Newsom's a cakewalk, maybe his voters don't come out, and then maybe all these Republicans who are like, yes, we're gonna vote for Cox, and then they come out and they vote in these close House districts and vote for those Republican candidates. Yeah. So I think Gavin Newsom and Cox might have a pretty strong, robust contest.
Well, we're going to have to take a break, but hopefully you're motivated to stick around. We'll be right back.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. He's Kevin Mullen still. And over here we have Melissa Michelson, our political analyst. We're talking about the statewide races. Do you see any race where a Republican can break the Democratic hold on all the statewide offices? Insurance commissioner, you can't really count, although Steve Poizner used to be a Republican.
I was going to say that's the only one I can think of. Is he still a Republican, and does that really count? But yeah, no, I think statewide, even though the majority of Californians don't register as Democrats, they still lean towards the Democratic Party. So even those folks who are maybe registered as no party preference, but most of them lean more towards the Democratic Party. And if you add together the folks who self-identify and the leaners, there's a Democratic edge here that I don't see any races where the Republicans have a strong chance.
So what happens to the Republican Party here? I mean, no party preference voters. Yeah. Independents, self-declared independents, have now passed the Republican Party, are in second place in the hierarchy, if you will, replacing the Republican Party in second place. Now, so the Republican Party, are they in California going to have to come up with essentially a new party, a new approach, something to somehow get back some of those independent voters, or what's the path forward for the Republican Party? I'm a Democrat, but we need a strong counterparty. We need a governing partner, if you will, to balance this debate in Sacramento, and we don't really have that right now, very frankly.
Yeah, as a political scientist, I strongly agree. You need a strong opposition party to protect accountability and protect democracy with a small d. So the Republican Party in California is suffering from the Trump effect because a lot of Republicans in California, or folks who would identify as Republicans in California, don't approve of the Trump administration, don't approve of the racism, the xenophobia, the Islamophobia. And so for folks who generally would prefer the Republican Party in California, they're torn. They want Republican Party conservatism. They want lower taxes, less government oversight, right? Less regulation, all of those things. But they don't want the hate of Trump. And so folks are pulling away. And the Republican Party candidates and elected officials in California are in a tough spot, right? Because that's their party. Trump's the leader of their party. But their voters, their constituents, don't want that. So I don't know how they're going to fix that. That's something the Republican Party's been kind of dealing with since 2012, or really 2008, and I don't know that they've figured it out.
And the standard bearer for the party, which is their gubernatorial nominee, is more pro-Trump than the sort of numbers we're talking about would indicate even mainstream Republicans think of themselves. And he's more pro-Trump than they are. So does that bode poorly? I mean, does it continue to drive down? You know, you said that the decline to state or non-party preference passed the Republicans. It's more like the Republicans passed them going the other way. They're dropping off. Is it?
Well, the thing about these leaners, so even people who register as decline to state, they do tend, other than like 4 or 5% of people, they do tend to lean towards one or the other. And the truth about voting is that those people then will vote their party, right? Their hidden party, their covert partisanship comes out when it's time to vote. And as we saw in 2016, partisanship's very, very powerful. And once John Cox is the nominee or anyone is the nominee of their party, whether it's a covert partisanship or an overt partisanship, they're going to vote their guy. They're going to vote for their party nominee.
So the other thing we read about in terms of the growth of non-party preference is among millennials. The younger voters basically are saying a pox on both your houses. Is that really what you're reading?
There is definitely an increase in the number of people who just are disappointed with both parties. And that's more among younger voters because their partisanship is less baked in. We tend to become firmer and firmer partisans as we get older, and young people are still kind of figuring out who they are. So, yeah. On the other hand, young people are, it seems, pretty energized about politics these days. We've seen that in the marches and in showing up for other things. And so I think that's the job of the parties, of the candidates, to reach to those young people and say, well, if you want to make change, if you're concerned about gun violence or you're concerned about the environment or what housing, voting is actually the way to make something happen.
And do you see among your students a more energized student than you saw, say, 10 years ago, or is it pretty similar? Are young people fired up right now?
Young people are fired up, and political science classes are popular. So that's like a little in-group joke that political science professors have is this is really good for business, all this renewed interest, because everyone wants to take our classes now because they want to know what the heck is going on and what can I do.
Well, for all the apparent chaos of the Trump administration, there are some clear things that they stand for. You even listed a couple of them. Tough in foreign policy, tough in our relations with other partners, a sort of bedrock conservatism on social issues, and booming economy. Have the Democrats provided a coherent message? You just listed some issues in which they could, but have they? And is that one of the big risks for them in November? Is that there isn't a clear difference that they're making clear in terms of there is a clear choice?
So, right, and this is one of the criticisms of the Hillary Clinton campaign is that instead of saying more about what the Democrats would do, instead of making sure that message got through, the message was, oh my gosh, look at this guy. Don't vote for Trump, vote for me. And so Democrats do have to be careful to say, vote for us, not just because we have to stop this, but because then we're going to make all these positive things happen. I think there is an increased appreciation for that in the Democratic Party, but it's so easy to just say, but look, look at what he did today, and it, like the campaign ads write themselves. But I think to motivate voters, it has to be about stop him and do this, and that has to be there too.
Well, his numbers are going up. I mean, there's no question about that.
Well, hey, he's gonna.
Of course, they couldn't go much lower.
He's gonna denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. He's gonna increase jobs by, renegotiating these trade deals. He's doing things that make people think like, hey, maybe this is gonna be okay.
And at that note, we have to stop. Melissa Michelson, thank you for being with us. We're going to have you on a bunch between now and November. And then Kevin and I will be doing an election night show here on Peninsula TV because the public demands it of us.
Fantastic.
So I'm Mark Simon.
And I'm Kevin Mullen.
Thank you for being with us, and join us next time on The Game.